Soloing over the B section to I've Got Rhythm, or the rhythm changes B, is the subject of today's lesson. Now, we've got dominant chords cycling in fourths. What can we use? What can we say over dominant chords? Well, for me, it's all about knowing what to play that sounds inside and also what outside sounds you can bring in. And that's what we're going to look at today. You know, as a start point, being able to say something over the basic chords and then being able to bring in outside sounds for interest. Because people just don't play to the chords which are there. If you really want to level up your soloing lines, then you have to learn to bring in other sounds beyond the simple chords of the standard or section of the song you're playing over. So we're going to take a look at what's the point of the B section, why it's there, how it works, and we're going to look at inside and outside scale and arpeggio choices. Before we get into analysing that, let's just remind ourselves of what the B section so I've Got Rhythm is. So we've got 2 bars of D7, 2 bars of G7, 2 bars of C7, and 2 bars of F7. So 4 dominant chords moving in fourths. And what's the point of this B section? Well, the end of the B section is always the thing, really. It's all about being able to get back to another A section, really. That last chord is the most important chord of that B section because we need F7 to get back to B flat, which is the one chord, the first chord at the start of the next A section. So the whole thing, these dominant chords moving, is all about getting to F7. Now, how are they working? D7's the dominant of a G chord, just so happens to go to a G dominant, which is the dominant of a C chord. C's the dominant of F, F's the dominant of B flat. Cycle's completed in terms of getting back to home. Now, if we want to solo over this B section, apart from the chromatic scale, there's not really one scale which is going to work for all of it. We can, however, use one scale type for each chord and move it for each chord. So we can use the scale which goes with dominant chords, which is the Mixolydian mode, Mixolydian scale, the 5th mode of the major scale, which is basically a major scale with a flat 7. So if you take, say, a D major scale, you'd have, and if we just flatten the 7th, instead of having C sharp, we have a C. That gives us the Mixolydian mode, the dominant sounding mode. Now this is the basic vanilla inside sounding choice, but it will work and it's a good place to start. Just as a start point, let's just make sure you can play that mode up and down through each one. So we're going to do D Mixolydian, G Mixolydian, C Mixolydian, and F Mixolydian. Now, ideally here, you want to be aware of the notes you're playing. You want to be aware of the sound. Sing it as you play it. Don't just follow tab and play mindlessly. For D, Mixolydian, G, C, F. So that's your basic scale up and down. It's a start point, but it wants to move to hearing it, knowing the notes. So know them up, know them down. So it's so important to not just have it as something you can play on the fretboard or in the tab. I put the tab to make it accessible. Try to not use it as quickly as possible and just rely upon the sound of the scale that you will absorb if you practice it enough. I then strive to create melodies with that. So if I just loop this section, I'll show you what I mean by that. So maybe do 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 do, simple melody, do do do, the root in the 7th, do 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 do, do 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 do, do do do, do 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 do, do do, maybe the root 3rd and 2nd. Da do da do da do da da do 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 da do da da do da da do da da do da do da. Maybe up to the 5th. Da 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 do da 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 do da. Da 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 do da da do da da do da 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 da, and so forth. That kind of thing. Trying to create little melodies. I think I'm a big fan of working with just a few notes, like I did there. Did root 3rd, so root 2nd and 3rd for each one. And then try to, add rhythmic ideas, melodic ideas to it, then up to the 5th. And obviously, to start with, you're going to want to go to the next note of the scale, like da da. But obviously, you can go do da 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 do like make bigger leaps, use the intervals that you can hear. That's the key thing. Try and make sure you can hear everything that you're playing and not just moving fingers to places where you know you can. But you know, and if that's a difficult thing for you, then suggest you do things like, which is play every note against the first note of the chord. So D, this is D mixed Lydian, and then sing that, and try and get used to those different leaps that you could make. The scale, knowing the scale is just the start. You've got to internalize the sound with it and then create melodic rhythmic ideas with it. So that's your inside scale choice where I'd begin with if you're trying to create ideas. And the next thing is your inside arpeggio, which is just a dominant 7th arpeggio. So really with this we want to know that, you know, what notes are in these chords. That's an important thing. If you don't know that, that's something you're going to need to know. And the fact that this is D, F sharp, A, C for D7, G, B, D, F for G7, C, E, G, B flat for C7, and then F, A, C, E flat. Now those chords are all united by the fact they've got the same intervals. They're all root, major third, perfect fifth, and a flat or minor 7th. So, you know, you need to know that as well, because they all have the same sound. If you listen to them, same sound quality. So if you can absorb the sounds, you'll be able to find these things for any dominant chord. To begin with, we're going to go up and down each arpeggio against the chords. It's kind of like an outline, if you like. Good way to internalize the sound of those chords. Again, melodic ideas can be created with just something as simple as that. And obviously the arpeggio could be played all up the neck. You can play arpeggios up and down a string, across the neck. You can add approach notes, chromatic notes, and so forth to jazz it up. But just your start point, can you get those arpeggios at the right time against the backing? You might have to start in 3-time first. And those arpeggios are found within the scales we just played. They are the 1st, 3rd, 5th and 7th note of each of those scales, so they sit together for me. Some other inside sounds I like to go for is through arpeggio substitutions, and dominant chords are very rich chords for these. Now, you can create all sorts of interesting sounds over dominant chords, and some I like that are quite inside sounding. Obviously we've got the one starting off the root chord, the regular dominant, but you can play a minor 7 flat 5 off the 3rd of the chord. So if we had a D7, we could play D7 off the root. Off the F sharp, the 3rd, we could play an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Off the 5th A, we could play an A minor 7. And off the 7th, we could play a major 7, so C major 7. And you get this. Now, why does this all work? Well, obviously, we're building an arpeggio off each note of the chord, but it's about the intervals of those arpeggio subs, if you like. So, you know, what is this? F sharp minor 7 flat 5 over a D7. It's F, A, C, E, so F sharp. And it's about what those, and with arpeggio substitutions, it's always about, well, what are the intervals of that chord over the chord we're playing over? So if we've got F sharp minor 7 flat 5, yes, it's, you know, F sharp, A, C, E, but against a D7, it's no longer root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, it's now 3rd, 5th, 7, 9. So that creates like a 9th, dominant 9th sound. The A minor 7, A, C, E, G, over in relation to D7 become 5, 7, 9, 4 or 11. And then the C major 7 becomes 7, 9, 4 or 11, and then this is the 6, which is a nice sweet sound. So you can combine these arpeggios, and I'll put them together in like a string, if you like, so you can hear all the sounds, but I wouldn't necessarily use them like this. It's just so I can illustrate it, you can combine any of them for different sounds. So I wouldn't necessarily use them all like that. It was more just to illustrate for sort of completeness of information. But if you paired a couple up, for a start, I wouldn't always play them like this, and I wouldn't play them like this necessarily. Always, you can play an arpeggio in so many ways. Like, that's my favourite way. Start with the root, then drop an octave, and go root, third, drop with the third, and fifth, and the seventh. You can do that from any note. Vary the order. You don't have to play them in order. But what I'd like to do, what I suggest you do, is pick a pair of those. So let's say the one off the root, so the seventh dominant arpeggio plus the one off the third, which is, you know, the minor 7 flat 5 one. So we could have D7 to F sharp minor 7 flat 5, like, that's a cool line. What if I did the, you know, the dominant and the major 7, maybe? That sounds nice. You just get different sounds, you know, and that's the whole point of arpeggio substitutions, is to bring in other sounds. And these ones sound inside, but I think they help create sort of more interesting sounds, sort of sweeter sort of sounds. What might be simplest thing to do is, you know, work with your dominant arpeggios first, as per sort of previously, and then try minor 7 flat 5 off the 3. So over the D7, be F sharp minor 7 flat 5. G7, it'd be B minor 7 flat 5. Over the C, B, E minor 7 flat 5. Over the F7 is A minor 7 flat 5. Dominant off the root, minor 7 flat 5 off the third, minor 7 off the fifth, major 7 off the flat 7. So we can always achieve inside sounds with arpeggios and scales. As ever, it's about knowing the notes, about knowing the sound of them, and then how to blend those sort of through nice close movements and interesting rhythms as well, and trying to create phrases with this harmony. But, you know, if you only play inside, we're going to be missing a big part of jazz, which is the sense of tension and resolution. I think some of those last ideas, you know, when you bring in the sounds of other chords, can create tension. But I like sort of if you went over a D7, if you kind of thought, well, I'm going to go D7 and then C major 7, then you go back to D7. So it kind of creates a move there. It goes D, C, D. We can do that there. That was just a taste of arpeggio substitution, implying other sounds. And for me, they're always there to create movement, like in that last example. But, you know, sometimes it's about adding to the progression as well, playing chords which aren't there, more as a progression. So we're going to do this with tritones, but first off, a simple thing to do is to turn, instead of just having all 4 dominant chords there, D7, G7, C7, F7, you can play the 2 of each chord as well. And I'm talking from a soloist perspective here. So instead of just D7, G7, C7, F7, we're going to think A minor 7, D7, so that's the 2 of the 5 chord, D minor 7, G7, again the 2 of the 5, G minor 7, C7, same thing, C minor 7, F7, same thing. So there, I'm thinking of so minor, dominant, minor, dominant, minor, dominant. You know, so you can hear it more easily if I go A minor 7, D7, D minor 7, G7, G minor 7, C7, C minor 7, F7. And that really is just like a 2-5-1 progression. You just don't go to the 1, apart from on the last time when it goes back to B flat. But so everything you know about 2-5 will work over that 2, and it just creates a bit more movement by thinking minor minor, dominant, minor, dominant. Just gives you some other options really. Now let's get into some of the outside sounds that you can bring in on this. So easiest way is with the tritone. So a tritone is a substitution of a dominant chord, and in this particular chord progression we could do it in a couple ways. The first way we look at it though is instead of going D7, G7, C7, F7, we're going to sub the G7 and the F7 out, so we get descending chord progression, which would go D7, D flat 7, C7, B7. So D7, D flat 7 instead of G, C7 as normal, then the B instead of the F7. You know, rhythm section wouldn't necessarily play that, it'd be the soloist sort of thinking from that perspective, and you get to play lines which go down. Just sort of a basic example there. Let me try it to the track so you can hear it, maybe with just some basic arpeggios. That last one sounded tense. You get the idea, so it gives you this descend, which is quite cool. And I think, you know, again, it's about getting used to the notes in the chords. If you go up a D7, you finish on a C, you could then go up to a semitone to D flat and get into a D flat 7, or you could go finish on that C of the D7, then go down a semitone to the 7th of D flat, so B. It is about, you know, so blending these sounds, getting used to the sounds of them. But that's one way you could do it, and you could apply the tritone to the other chords as well too. So a little while ago we talked about having the 2 for each dominant chord, you know, like A minor 7, D7, D minor 7, G7 and so on. Now the tritone's a dominant chord, so we can add its minor chord, its 2 chord as well, giving us A minor, D7, A flat minor, D flat 7, G minor, C7, G flat minor 7, B7. So we can think that too, like you know, that, and that would give us, you know, A minor 7 running into a D7, A flat minor 7 running into D flat 7, G minor 7 running into C7, and then G flat minor 7 or running into B7. And we've moved a long way from just going D7, G7, C7, F7, haven't we, really? And you can hear it easily when I play a line which just descends through the same thing, so like so that was A minor into D7, A flat minor into D flat 7, and G minor into C7, G flat minor into B7. So that's just a few ways you can work with inside and outside ideas. There's obviously many ways you could play outside in terms of other scales you could use, other substitutions and things you could do. Just wanted to show you a few. Didn't want this to be exhaustive or a video that lasts for days. Which ones did you like the sound of? Are some of them new to you? Are these new ideas for you to be working with? Take your time to get used to the harmony found within these ideas and how they connect, because that's the really important thing, to absorb the sound and feel and hear those connection points when you're soloing. Don't forget, all the resources from today can be found at my website. Just check the description for a link. You'll also find information there about the Jazz Guitar with Andy Facebook group. My Buy Me a Coffee's there if you want to shout me one of those. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing for jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and Saturday. I'll put a couple other videos related to today's lesson up in case they're of interest to you. If you've got any questions, leave them below and I'll get back to you. Until next time, you take care.